This video buyer's guide has been put together to cover off some important things that you should consider when you're choosing your gaming monitor. Now, it could be argued that your monitor is the most important part of your system, as everything you do on your PC is visualized through your monitor. Getting the best features will allow you to get the best experience from your other components. These days though, there is a lot to look at when it comes to choosing a monitor, so we're going to do our best to break down all of the different options as simply as possible. Now, first thing to decide is the size and shape or aspect ratio of the monitor that you want. This could be based on a number of factors like the desk space you have or the distance that you sit. Whatever the reasons, here are the most common options. We won't go into size as that one's pretty obvious, but it is worth noting that if you're limited to a specific space, then different aspect ratios could affect the size that you can fit within that space. For example, if you have lots of width but limited height, then an ultra-wide monitor may allow you to have more screen real estate, whereas those limited for width but not height may be better to go for a more standard shape to maximise the size of screen that they can fit in. The aspect ratio affects the pixel resolution of a monitor, although generally most monitors fall into one of a few resolutions that are then widened to change the ratio. So a 1080p monitor has a standard 1920 by 1080 pixels, whereas an ultra-wide 1080p monitor could have 2560 by 1080 pixels. The extra width resulting in more pixels across the horizontal axis. Size also affects pixel density for a given resolution, so it's best to up the resolution the larger the monitor you go to. As a general rule, on a standard monitor, 1080p looks good up to about 28 inches, 1440p looks good up to about 32 inches, and going larger than that, we recommend going to 4K. This changes with ultra-wide monitors though, as they keep the same height as a smaller monitor and add more pixels to the width, meaning the diagonal measurement increases without affecting the pixel density. Here's the different aspect ratios along with the most supported pixel resolutions. 16 by 9. This is the most common aspect ratio on the market. It's the same as your TV, and so it's fully compatible with pretty much everything. Common resolutions are 1920 by 1080, 2560 by 1440, and 3840 by 2160. Then there's the 21 by 9 aspect ratio. This is known as ultra-wide and is becoming increasingly popular with gamers as it offers a wider field of view than 16 by 9. Most games now support this aspect ratio, and it can be better than standard 16 by 9 for movies that use the ultra-wide format, as you won't have black bars at the top and bottom. However, there is a compromise, as 16 by 9 content will have the black bars at the sides. Common resolutions are 2560 by 1080, 3440 by 1440, and 3840 by 1600. And then there's 32 by 9 aspect ratio, also known as ultra-wide. This is the most recent option available on the market, effectively offering the same as having two monitors side by side without having the screen bezels in the way. This aspect is great for productivity, offering lots of screen real estate for multitasking. You do need to have a lot of available width in your workspace though to accommodate it. And there are a lot of games that won't support a full screen experience. The most common resolutions are 3840 by 1080 and 5120 by 1440. There are also some screens now appearing that fit somewhere in between some of these aspect ratios. Generally, you can understand the shape by looking at the resolution to see where it fits. Pixels can't be stretched, only added to the horizontal or vertical resolution to change the aspect ratio. It's definitely worth checking that the games or content that you view supports the aspect ratio or resolution of the monitor. And on top of this, it's worth noting that all of these aspect ratios are available in the traditional flat or curved options, with differing strength of curve available from different brands. Generally though, the wider the aspect that you go, the more beneficial that the curve can be, keeping the distance from your eye to the screen the same as you turn your head. Now, after you've chosen your aspect ratio, the next thing to consider is the panel type that best suits what you want. There are 4 types of panel now available. These are TN, VA, IPS and OLED. Each has their own advantages and disadvantages. Now, we're not going to go into detail on these right now, as there are plenty of videos available that do that already, but we do have a handy graphic to show the main ones for each type. Please bear in mind that there's a huge crossover depending on the quality of the panel, so the best of each type will minimise its disadvantages against the other. Reviews are really important when deciding on a specific model. Each of the panel types can also potentially now support HDR or high dynamic range. However, currently brands are in the early stages of adoption, so models are quite limited. HDR has a certification process that tells you how much of the standard a monitor can support. These are split into tiers starting at HDR 400 and go through to HDR 1400. Next up is the refresh rate. This is not really important if you aren't playing games, as the minimum for a monitor is 60 Hz or 60 frames per second, which is much higher than TV or films anyway. Now, if you are playing games, then the higher the refresh rate, the smoother and more up-to-date the picture will be. Studies have shown that having a faster refresh rate leads to higher in-game performance. Common refresh options are 60, 120, 144 and 240 Hz, with some options available in between. And this year, we should also see a 360 Hz monitor from Asus. So which do you need? Well, higher is always better. However, there is another limiting factor. How fast is your PC on the games that you play? To get the full benefit, your graphics card needs to be able to play your game at the same frames per second your monitor is displaying. That's something you'll need to look into to decide the best option to go for, as naturally faster monitors cost more money. And at some point, you may be better at getting another feature instead of just going faster if you aren't going to benefit from it. Surely that's it, right? There can't be much else you need to know when buying a monitor. Well, unfortunately, there is more you need to know, so watch on before you commit to make a purchase you could regret. Next up is Adaptive Sync technology. Again, this one is just for gamers. There are 3 options available right now: Adaptive Sync, AMD FreeSync and NVIDIA G-Sync. Adaptive Sync is a standard implemented by VESA, which essentially allows a monitor to be synced up to a graphics card. AMD FreeSync is essentially AMD's adaptation of this standard, with FreeSync 2 and FreeSync HDR having extra features that aren't fully supported by the Adaptive Sync standard. Then G-Sync is NVIDIA's own version that doesn't use the Adaptive Sync standard, but instead has a special chip added to sync up the GPU and monitor. This is technically the best implementation and provides the best results, but it does cost more for manufacturers to add to their products, as it requires special hardware. Recently, however, that all changed though when NVIDIA introduced G-Sync Compatible and G-Sync Ultimate. Compatible is essentially an adaptation of the Adaptive Sync standard, like the AMD variation, and it will work with lots of monitors, including AMD FreeSync, as long as they're over a certain standard, whilst Ultimate denotes the monitors that have the hardware chip. The last technical feature that you need to look at is the backlight technology that's used. This can differ depending on the panel type, but essentially it falls into one of 2 categories for most monitors: backlit or array. Backlit is essentially when you have a single light source either behind or to the sides that lights the whole display. Raising or lowering the brightness of this light will affect the whole display at the same time. Generally, this results in poor HDR implementation, as having a dark scene with even one bright light source in it requires the backlight to be on full brightness, leading to the blacks looking more grey as light bleeds through the closed pixels. On the other hand, array lighting usually involves having a mesh of individual LEDs spread across the screen. These are controlled in zones so that one zone can be lit to a different degree than another, allowing larger contrast between light and dark. The more LEDs and zones you have, the more granular control you can get within any one scene. However, more LEDs means more cost, so these displays are more expensive than backlit ones. They can also suffer from something called haloing, which is especially noticeable on something like a desktop PC, where there's not enough zones to accurately represent something small and bright like a mouse pointer, leading to a whole zone being lit up and making it stand out. So that's all the technical differences you need to know about monitors before buying, but there are also a few features that are worth knowing about too. Now these might not change the quality of the picture, but they can make all the difference when it comes to practicality, ease of use, or even just looking the part. First up is something simple, the stand. Assuming you aren't wall mounting your monitor, the stand needs to be sturdy, but different models may also offer different levels of adjustability like height and tilt, which could be the difference between getting the right spot or not. Check the specs of the monitor that you're looking at to see if the stand supports the positioning you want on your desk. Next up is the connections. For most people, one will do, but if you want to connect other devices to your monitor like a games console, Blu-ray player, or even another PC, then you need to make sure you have enough connections of the right type to do so. Other connections can also be helpful for your setup. Some monitors feature a USB hub allowing you to connect more than one device through your monitor, and there are also options for headphones and microphones available too, especially handy if your PC is hidden away. And if you're spending long periods in front of your monitor, there are also features that help with that. Some monitors feature a blue light filter mode to reduce eye strain, and others also have a backlight strobing mode, which helps to reduce motion blur and eye strain during gaming. And lastly, there is of course RGB. No gaming setup is complete without some well-placed lighting to set the mood or get that amazing Instagram shot. Whew, that was a lot of information, but we do hope you found it useful and easy to follow. Tell us what you think in the comments, and don't forget, if you like this video, help it get seen by others by giving it a like. And if you want to see more videos from us, then hit the subscribe button.